Why isn't anyone building a legitimate AI company in Australia? Like, you've got a lot of these leaders saying, we can't do it, we shouldn't do it. I think we have to be really conscious of the fact that in a moment when this huge technology evolution is happening, everyone else is just wrapping APIs or they're fine-tuning models on people's stuff that they've borrowed from an organization that bought 256 GPUs. Guys, we could be doing so much more. Let's build model factories, right?
Yeah.
Let's build a foundational LLM from scratch. Let's not be afraid to do foolish things. Let's not be afraid to disrupt ourselves. Let's also not be afraid to dream really big. Maybe I want to be foolish because that's what changes the world.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to another episode of What the Tech podcast. Our guest today is a seriously impressive technologist and entrepreneur, someone who's built, scaled, and exited 4 startups and still isn't done pushing boundaries. He's held senior engineering roles at some of the world's biggest innovators, EasyGo, the crew behind Steak and Kick, plus Microsoft and AWS. He's also an inventor with multiple patents in machine learning and AI, and now champions technical and product excellence in the boardroom, including with the Australian Sports Foundation. With degrees in computer science, software engineering, and law, he's basically the definition of tech meets strategy. Please welcome Dave Lemphers. Welcome, Dave.
Thank you for having me.
Should we clap?
Yeah, that's awesome to have you on the episode today,
Welcome,
Dave. Welcome.
Welcome to Sydney.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Awesome. So how was your trip to Sydney?
It's been awesome
Yeah.
so far. Yeah, got in yesterday, and we just kind of like kicked around a little bit, and then this morning, just got straight into it.
Yeah, awesome. Lot of exciting.
Is it worth
sort of work.
mentioning that this episode is shot before the big announcement?
Yeah, it definitely is.
So
Yeah.
if you by the time you watch this episode, Matilda is already out.
Yeah, yeah. So Dave, we're gonna jump straight into it because we've got lots to cover.
Yeah.
Maybe one episode is just not enough, but let's see what we can do.
Yeah.
So you've obviously traveled out of Australia to the US. What brought you home, and why is this the right time for Australia to build its own AI capability?
Yeah, so I spent 12 years in the US, and it was an incredible experience, right? Like, I think working at Microsoft, in the very early founding team of Windows Azure, actually has a lot of similar feelings as AI today. So we were the underdog. AWS at that stage were 2 years ahead of us. And the company was like, let's go all in on cloud and let's do something really new. And, I think they had a really great kind of esprit de corps inside the company around, let's not be afraid to do foolish things. Let's not be afraid to disrupt ourselves.
Yeah.
But let's also not be afraid to dream really big. It's totally fine if you dream big and you don't quite get there. And so, went through that journey of startups and working at companies like Microsoft, and then, moved back to Australia just before COVID went off. And then realized that Australia had changed a lot, and some of the things that, made me move to the US had also changed. And so I decided to start to look for companies that would give me the same experiences I had in the US that I really loved, that kind of high voltage, a high velocity engineering culture. And worked for AWS here, and then met Ed, in the EasyGo team, and then got to spend a year and a half there as their CTO. And it was during that time that we really started to think about what does it look like if Australia became a first class, engineering technology country. And that naturally created this question of like, could we be doing AI like they do it globally? Like, why isn't anyone doing it?
Yeah.
Why is everyone just a wrapper around, OpenAI or Anthropic? And that's kind of the journey started from there.
Yeah, great. And why do you think that shift happened? Like you mentioned that things had changed back home. Yeah. Why do you think it happened?
Yeah, I think that Well, actually, yeah, let me kind of like go into a little bit of detail there. I think what changed was um, more and more students were graduating, and these were the STEM generation, right? And so they were graduating, and there was a feeling of hunger and appetite to, and we were seeing this as we were like, interviewing people who were, a couple of years out of uni, where they were like, I've worked at, some of these bigger organizations in Australia. I'm not really feeling the intensity, the engineering culture that I want to work for. But we also want to stay in Australia. We don't want to have to go overseas. Like, family lifestyle here is amazing. So I think, and then also people, these next generations are starting to understand as well that they've missed a lot of those booms, right? The property boom is gone. What last stat I looked at was 8 times salary to get into a house. The mining boom's over, right? No one wants to go work in a mine.
Yeah.
So we're starting to see in Australia the same factors that created the innovation culture in America happening here. So you've got more people starting to agitate and go, we probably should be doing more than just digging it out of the ground or shaving it off a sheep's back, right? So I think that created a moment where we certainly were like, well, okay, why isn't anyone building a legitimate AI company in Australia? And you've got a lot of these, leaders saying we can't do it, we shouldn't do it, and it's like, that's immediately that's going to make
and they probably don't know as much about it as the practitioners, so they don't really know what they're talking about when they say you can't do it, right?
Right. And I think as well, going overseas, and I think this is like any kind of experience like this, right? When you go and see, and I've through the Australian Sports Foundation, I'm fortunate to know athletes who've played at the top level here in Australia, then gone to the US, and then they come back and their minds have changed forever. What they think is possible is like, levels above what they thought was possible here.
Yeah.
And I think when you come back from building Windows Azure, selling startups, working with people like Eric Schmidt, when you've done that and you come back, you go, guys, we could be doing so much more. But I know what that looks like. Let's go start doing it. And that was really where Maincode and the story of Matilda really, started.
Wow. So it's that global exposure and that, seeing the vision beyond what we have here at home.
Yeah, I'm a huge fan of, black swan thinking, right? I think that in every situation there is something we haven't thought is possible. And I think if you have the will to make that happen, and when we were sitting and thinking about like what would it look like to build the AI company in Australia, you've got to be really bold about that and really audacious, right? So we were like, let's build model factories, right? Let's build a foundational LLM from scratch, right? And don't worry if people are going, you can't do it, you won't do it, whatever.
Let's do it anyway.
Right. You lose nothing by trying, right? And I
think that's a very, I've seen that more from Americans, that are having that type of mentality of like, I'm just gonna do it.
Yeah.
And then, I mean, when you even watch movies, it's like
fail fast,
fail fast, fail forwards, where you just go for it, die for it, and then whatever happens. So along the way, you'll be making some good learnings,
right,
that you can incorporate, whether you have to pivot or you need to keep digging into what you already have. I mean, what you already like seen as a vision, right? So,
right.
That's pretty good. So pretty spot on. Yeah.
Well, and also like we talk a lot about this, and before we all left Melbourne, we did the very last stand up, for this big South by Southwest sprint. And the thing that was really important for all of us to recognize is that as soon as you start to be obsessed with the artifacts and the results, you lose vision and appetite. And so and that's why we're not launching a product or anything at South by Southwest. We're coming to share our experience in building out MC1 and building out Matilda, because what we want to make sure people understand, and I think role modeling in this community is really important, is that it's not about how much you made, who your big customers are. That's a very high bar for a young community to have to establish. What's more important is you celebrate the learning and the experience, right? Like what we as a team have learned in a year from building model factories from scratch, building Matilda from scratch, that's the actual piece that matters. The output, like Matilda as a model or the model factory as infrastructure, that will come and go. Like that's not the takeaway.
Yeah. So what exactly is Australian-made AI? And when Australians use ChatGPT or Claude, what are we giving up? And why should everyday Australians care about where their AI comes from?
Look, for us, Australian-made AI is something that we've aligned with and feel really passionate about as a direct, or in direct opposition to this idea of sovereign AI. So obviously, when we started, we were talking about sovereign AI, and we were starting to understand and learn more about it.
Yeah.
And then we started doing, right? Roll our sleeves up, so we're not building frameworks and governance policy and all that. Like, let's go build this stuff.
Yeah.
And so what we quickly realized is sovereign AI as a concept is very narrow, and it's very difficult. It's more rhetoric, right? So it's very difficult to build anything meaningful around. Australian-made AI literally is what's written on the can, right? We're building it Australia with Australians. We're all together in this journey. We want to build this technology here, but we also want to sell it overseas, right? And create that economy to lay the foundation for the generations coming, so they've got something to look forward to and work in.
Yeah.
So it is far more of a responsibility turning the flywheel, and that's very much how we think about it. So we don't think about it in terms of like publishing research or deploying models for status or vanity. It's actually building the foundation for grassroots AI here for people to work in this industry, contribute globally. And so what that allows us to do as well is to do it in a very Australian way, right? Aligns with our values, aligns with our feelings around ingenuity and invention, something I think we do really well.
Yeah.
And there's a market for it, because we talk to international companies that recognize Australia's approach to solving problems and really like it. So they're like, we like the idea of buying Australian-made AI. That sounds really good, right? Yeah. So, and the way that plays out for us as well is that we've been very intentional about the design of everything. So the way we think about data, the way we recognize creators of that data and the people who produce that data, and why it's important to respect their rights, whether that be copyright or their right to earn a living, from their toil. Yeah. So I think that's a really important piece that we've designed from the very start. But the other one is having.
And then again, sorry, would you say that is then unique as well to Maincode?
Yeah, I think when we envisioned what Australian-made AI looked like, it was respectful, deeply aligned with Australian values of fairness, and having an opportunity, as someone trying to build something. So I think what that means is that we are, very thoughtful and intentional about data we use, and we come up with ways to achieve what we want by building on very small data sets, building on data sets where we have to be respectful and recognize the rights of the creators. You can, and I talk about this a lot, right? That it's not that you cannot do that. That's a technical decision, and sometimes it's, when people talk about what's happening with copyright infringement today, they position it as something that is just inherent in the model, but it's really not.
You just can't avoid it.
Right.
There's no way.
It's a complete business decision to do it that way. Yeah. Like, so I think once you start sharing that with people and they become more aware of it, they start to go like, oh, okay, actually I didn't know that. And I think that's an important distinction that people need to know, is when you are consuming AI from people who are taking a position that they cannot respect people's rights to deliver it, something's immediately off.
Something
right?
is off.
Yeah.
Sure. And so why choose the name Matilda?
Yeah, so Matilda, well, actually what happened was the internal name for it was Q. We just called it Q,
Q.
to begin
Yeah.
with. Yeah, it was just our internal code name. And then I'm a huge fan of Banjo Patterson. You know, I grew up on those stories. And we were talking about it one day in terms of like what it's like to, like when you think about those Australian icons of like pack your swag and just go off into the frontier, right? And just like go explore and find out what's out there.
Yeah.
And something, and then of course Waltzing Matilda, right? It's like an unofficial, national anthem. And it just felt right. Like that we would build something that, even though we are the caretakers and custodians of it, it is very much Australia's LLM. And we wanted to make sure that Australians could turn around in any setting where someone goes, well, but you know, the US has this and Canada has that, right? And they could go, well, Australia now has this.
Yeah.
Right? And I think that's important for Australians to have.
Yeah.
And so
they can identify themselves into that name, right? So when you say Matilda and you're Australian, you know exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Yeah, nice.
Yeah, that's great. And it's always good to have a story behind it.
Yeah.
And we touched a little bit already on this, the social aspects of having world-class AI within Australia. What about the environmental aspects and governance principles? Is it possible to build world-class AI while still considering those other E and G principles?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, again, I'm a huge believer that scarcity creates better solutions. I think teams, and this is why startups do so well, right, is that because of that resource constraint and scarcity, you have to innovate in ways that people who've got trillions of dollars and can roll out as many GPUs as they want don't have to think about. But it also means that they tend not to be considerate about the world around them. Like they're hyper, kind of focused on themselves. And I think when we started, it wasn't because we made a specific decision. It was like, we don't have a lot of resources. And also we don't want to just go and hoover up everyone's data without being considerate. So how do we build models that can really do interesting things off very small amounts of data? But also we don't want to deploy millions and millions of GPUs soaking up all the energy of the sun. Like you have to have some level of responsibility in anything you do. So we started to ask the question, like, well, where can we build small, efficient models that don't take a lot of time to train, can be trained on very small amounts of data and deliver real value? Because the other thing too is you want to make it accessible economically, right? It can't just be for the people who can afford it. So that's where we came up with a real focus on hybrid models. Matilda's a good example of a hybrid model. So they're very small, they're very efficient to train, they don't require a lot of data or resources, but they're trained to do a very specific task. And because they're task specific, they also end up returning a lot more value to businesses. And that's the sweet spot we play, which is great because it means that we are a complement into the current AI landscape of the big, text generators. When we talk about neurosymbolic models that are able to actually be highly explainable, very task specific, understand rules, that's the space we play, because we think actually that's where most of the value will be created the next 10, 20 years.
So you've effectively created a niche within the global ecosystem when it comes to AI.
Yeah, because if you look at AI as a complete market and you look at all of the different use cases that, and you actually see that with customers today. So customers go on a journey where they use a LLM provider and they'll begin inside the organization with, we're using it for summarization, text generation, very, very real and powerful use case. And we certainly do. But then what happens is they immediately start to look at their business process. So they're like, I have to classify a document, I have to review something, I have to check a set of rules. And their first interaction with the LLM provider is they submit that request to an LLM and the LLM goes, I need more help, right? So now you're cramming the context window with data. You're working with a prompt engineer to try and refine this. It's almost like coming up with an incantation that's going to make the magic just pop up. And they never quite get to a level of accuracy that's good enough for business. So then the next stage of, you want to call it like the journey of AI, right? But like the next stage is they go, well, what we actually need is a custom model, something that understands our rules, our data, and the tasks we're trying to achieve. Maybe we should go buy some GPUs, hire some PhDs, go build some models.
Or just go on to OpenAI and just click fine tune and they just get.
That really good point, Renee. So like that's the mid step, right? So they go, let me fine tune an LLM. But the problem with that is that an LLM from the very basis cannot do that task because it was built for it.
That's right.
So after the fine tuning and ragging and stuff, they go, okay, now that's really not working either. So what's the problem is actually the LLM itself, like that architectural design. It's the equivalent of saying, we're going to take a warehouse, right? And you look at any conversion into a house, it's never quite right. It wasn't built for that purpose.
I mean, it still have like a roof and 4 walls, but it wasn't built for that purpose.
Right. And you can do whatever you want, right? But it's never going to quite
feel like a house.
Exactly. And so then what happens is they go on that journey of maybe we want to be model builders, and obviously setting up a factory, setting up a model team, very hard to do. And then the next step is go find a model builder. And there's like 3 in the world, Maincode being one of them. So we actually find a lot of people land on our doorstep and reach out is because they're like, we love OpenAI and Anthropic, we're getting lots of value, and we're like, same. But they're like, now we have these business cases we need to deliver on. And when you look at that, it's actually way bigger as the market opportunity than just text generation and summarization. So that's why, all of those factors to us felt like the right thing to do, with our strategy. And so hence why we're investing in model factories, model development team to do specifically that.
And then in that regard with the model factory and be able to provide to your customers these specialized models, how do you still add that Australian value into the mix? Because we still need to that's differentiator, right, versus the one that they
the cultural bias. Maybe.
That's why, versus going to OpenAI and
asking them to do that,
the fine-tuned model that they could get out of it.
Yeah. So and we get this question a lot: is like, how do you ensure that your the model and we can talk about it being Australian values, but what we're really getting at is how do you create a model that is custom tuned and built to your needs, where you're not having to take someone else's work and refine it. Because I think when you take a open model today, there's so much cooked into it that you never see.
Yeah,
you have no idea what's been put in there.
Transparency's not there.
Yeah, and
they could provide you with a data set, but like you said, the way they they move. Like they kind of like fine-tune those neurons as they were building out their architecture, the model architecture. If you're not like in a research space and PhD level type of like AI researcher, this will just go over the top of your head because it's just too much. But
no, and exactly right. Like, first of all, they wouldn't release it because of the IP nature and what they'd be open to legally, right? Of like the things that have been done to create them, but. Also, even if they did, most people wouldn't really be able to understand like what is it doing. But I think that there are a lot of really simple analogies that make sense. Anytime you're buying something from someone else where it's already pre-baked, right? So you think about baking a cake is a really great analogy, right? Like if I just go get a sponge from somewhere and I don't know what went into it, you can look at 3 sponges, they'll look the same. But knowing exactly what went in also gives you the control. If you're like, well, I want it to be a little sweeter, I want it to be a little bit dense, right? You get a lot of control of those knobs that you won't get from an open model because the knobs have already been set.
Yeah.
So that's the first piece, is that you need to be able to control those knobs for customers. One of those knobs is, how do you want the model to reason and think and contemplate about the world? And so I think a lot of people think, let's use Australian specifically, that, if the model goes, "G'day, mate," then it's an Australian model, right? But what you learn about so much of the data that flows, and when we work with our customers and we work with their data, Australian data has a shape about it, right? It's encoded with our cultural nuances, the way we act and behave, our values, right?
The values, yeah.
So that's the first step, is that by bringing in that data, you immediately make it more like what we're used to having as a country and a culture. But the other thing too is you have to get really smart about how do you take a small amount of data and generate more data from it. And I think the innovations we've made in expanding data sets, taking very small, high quality data sets and turning them into much larger data sets that we can use to train models and improve their capability, I think that's been one of the biggest innovations we've made over the last 12 months out of necessity. And I think we will continue to invest heavily in that space.
And so let's take a step back, because you mentioned the phrase or the term model factory quite a bit.
Yeah.
So for those people who don't have a clear understanding what that means, what is it?
Yep.
And what does success look like?
So so when you look at AI, the way we build AI, or as model builders build AI, it's no different than a widget, like a factory. So a model factory is the environment and the infrastructure, physical infrastructure deployed so that we can run our jobs, our manufacturing jobs on it. So, it's in a data center, it's racks of compute and storage. There's allocations of GPUs just for training models. Then there's allocations of GPUs for serving those models for customers. There's massive storage capability to store all of the training data and process data. And then there's a separate set of technology, which is for you actually hosting the application. And then there's all the network infrastructure to expose that to the world. Now, traditionally what happens is people use hyperscalers and cloud computing people to do that. The cost is like the kind of value equation doesn't make sense for a lot of companies, but you also lose a lot of control. So when we're speaking to customers, they want to know that we've got full stack capability to train their model in data that's housed with us, with our team. It's not going anywhere. It's not getting uploaded to an organization that is subject to the Cloud Act, for example, right? Where they're going to have to cough up the data if, compelled to. So the data is run by Maincode in our, infrastructure owned by us. Our team is the only one using it. We're not renting it from somewhere or borrowing it from somewhere. And what that allows us to do is train that model, host the applications that we help build for them, so they can start using those models as if they were using an OpenAI or an Anthropic. And what's really important about the factory that I think a lot of people don't necessarily grok on the first pass is that it's highly virtualized and automated. So we've spent a lot of time this year investing in the software layer that sits on top of that, so that we can very quickly change jobs, change models, whatever the particular training that needs to happen, and be the most efficient with that infrastructure to achieve the outcome. And the way we think about it is, obviously the factory is all of the hardware, infrastructure, internet, power, whatever, to run your workloads. And then there's the actual software layer that delivers the tokens. And I think for a lot of people, when they get to that stage of like, okay, we've tried the wrapper, it didn't work. Now maybe we should stand up our own infrastructure. What happens is they go and speak to a provider and they're like, we'll sell you GPUs. And the way we think about it actually is like the old days where you bought the computer, brought it home. If it didn't have an operating system, what are you going to do? Like in the old days, people did write their own operating systems, but you need a software layer to make that hardware do the thing you want it to do. And so at Maincode, we really focus on the tokens, right? So it's like, great, we're going to help. And we work with customers either to deploy their models on our infrastructure, or we'll help them stand up their own model factory. But what we help them do is take that hardware, wrap the software around it so it produces tokens, because that's what they really want. They don't really care about GPUs and hard drives. They care about tokens.
Yeah, and I think I can already see that working well for financial services organizations, where obviously they're sitting on massive amount of data. And they want to be able to build their AI products with that massive amount of data, but they're not tech companies. So they can't go and start, building their own, infrastructure to train models. So, a model factory will be a good place to start. I think that actually answers that.
Yeah, and also like in a lot of these situations, and we all experience it, right? Like we're sitting here today chatting, right? It's just a richer experience when you can build relationships, especially in something so critical. And I think for a lot of them, being either on the other side of a video chat or on the end of a customer email, to try and work with someone, or all that they're given is a prompt engineer, right? It's like, yep, this person's going to help you work out your problem. They're like, intuitively over time, they're like, prompt can't be the only thing you need to customize to make this happen, right? So I think it is a huge opportunity for Australian-made AI, for us to be building factories, building the teams, right? Like none of this would be possible without the Maincode team. They're incredibly, talented, passionate, curious explorers, right? Who are able to build the most incredible, software and solve the toughest problems. And I think what we want to show Australia is that for all the pundits who say we can't do it or we shouldn't do it, there's very real, that's the thing. It's so much easier to go, we shouldn't do it and we can't do it.
Yeah.
If you're the executive of some massive, ASX listed company where you haven't touched a keyboard for years, right? It's so much easier to sit there and be like, right?
No, it could
Right. But roll your sleeves up and start building, and then you can actually create some stuff. You can actually turn the flywheel, the economy, the industry for people who won't get that chance. That matters.
Yeah, it does. And shifting gears a little bit, we've talked about the AI and infrastructure and the opportunities there and in the technology itself. But now we want to touch on the view that people have, the general public, I would say, that AI is going to have negative impacts on jobs.
Yeah.
What is your take on that?
Yeah, look, I totally understand where people come from. And this isn't new though, right? Every major technological evolution has had people feel afraid that they're going to be displaced. And I think that's very fair. I think what we find, and certainly how we feel about this is, and we talk about this in the creative sense, the way the algorithms work is they fundamentally look backwards. So if they weren't shown something, they're not going to know about it.
Yeah.
And so one of the things that obviously humans do incredibly well is we're able to invent, and imagine things that don't exist. And we don't need to have any kind of prior knowledge of something for us to do that.
Yeah.
So it's my position that AI is not going to create the next amazing song, right? That really speaks to you. It's not going to create a painting that, makes you feel something, right? It's not going to create a recipe or a dish that makes you go like, oh my God.
We want to have that cultural awareness that helps create.
Or the lived experience.
Yes.
Right. And also, while AI today has elements of our brains, it doesn't have so many parts of our, like how we do memory compaction, how we dream state, how we clean out all of the stuff in our brains. Like it cannot do any of those things. So this idea, and again, let's take a step back and ask ourselves, where does this rhetoric come from? The doomer rhetoric. It comes from massive technology companies with agendas who need people to feel terrified so that they believe what they say and then channel all their capital towards them. So when these companies come out and say, whoa, this is what I love about it, AI is going to take over your life and all this kind of stuff, if it's not us taking care of it for you, right? And you're like, that feels a bit weird. You know what I mean? And then they go and do the worst possible things like suck up all the copyrighted data, right? So I think the community is now starting to go like, yeah, we see the BS in this. But I think so let's start looking at research and facts, right? So there was some really great research that came out from the governing bodies in Australia for, creative songwriters, producers. And what it showed was that 40 to 50% of their time was spent in administration. So when you look at what an artist has to do working with Spotify, for example, and reconciling all of the royalties and stuff, it's almost 40 to 50% of their time. AI is excellent at that. So if you now focus away from generating songs and instead solutions that help songwriters get rid of all of that, now you've got 100% of the time to write songs. And that's so we're for humans, right? The very first principle, we have leadership principles at Maincode. The very first one is for humans, right? We think about humans and what's good for humans. We don't think about AGI and ASI and like what we think about like, super intelligence.
Let's start by first being there for humans.
Right.
Before we start tapping into that, artificial general intelligence.
Right.
Which, it's like a long distance, kind of like North Star type of like, goal that all these organizations are chasing, and they're trying to push that agenda.
Right.
Forgetting about like the actual people are going to be using to actually, like be able to like move faster, deliver faster, especially. So, yeah.
No, and we absolutely believe so. Again, our position is that if we can build human centered AI that focuses on the stuff people don't like to do and don't do well, right? The cognitive load, then they're going to do the things computers cannot do, right? And they're going to do it really well. And that's how we're going to stimulate the type of AI ecosystem we want to see happen. And again, it's very values based, right? We're a country that doesn't want to like soak up all the resources, capitalize everyone, have just 1% of it, people owning everything. We're not that kind of culture, right? So we are a culture where like want to try and make everyone have a good life and help our partners and our friends and our customers do well. So it is a very different approach.
It is,
And even our name, Maincode, comes from that, right? It's like, Maincode came from the fact that the start of every major program is the main function, and we want to power those experiences. We don't want to replace them. We just want to make them better. And make those companies and individuals better with AI rather than replace them. Like that's a morbid future, right? And no one wants that.
And so what would you say when it comes to the system that we currently have, the education system we currently have, where you're supposed to go to university or some formal education? Once you're out of there, you go get a job. But now all these entry-level jobs are then covered by AI, and therefore you don't have 5 years of experience. And they say, well, you need 5 years of experience to get a job, but then you need a job to get 5 years experience. So what do we need to do? What do we need to change within the education system to support this future that we expect?
I actually don't think anything needs to or is going to change. I think what we're seeing is that there are incumbents, and look, we see this with the political landscape, right? The talk of compliance, right? So compliance is great for massive companies who understand the procurement process and have massive compliance teams. They'll win the work, right? So those need to be broken down and kind of destroyed to really allow grassroots innovation to happen. But I think what you're going to find is that all of these incumbents who have operated without any form of innovation or intelligence will be replaced by companies that embrace it, but they're still going to need people. It's just the people are going to do different jobs. And what's actually really great is, and why I'm so hopeful about this, is we've got so many students now coming out who are incredibly scientifically minded and literate. And if you actually think about it, the jobs that are available today are a function of the industry supported by government largely, right? So it's like mining, those kind of like non-STEM jobs. But we had to do the lip service and theater of like having a STEM country, right? So we went invested in all of that. And I think why it's important for us to not only build primary foundational AI here that creates the ecosystem of AI businesses and users, because that will give jobs to those people coming through. So we have to do that, right? We have to create that economic flywheel. And that's something that we as voters need to make sure that the people we're voting in get, because every time we vote someone in who came from the mining, whatever background, and they come and represent technology.
That's the future that they're seeing. The same. The past is the future for them.
Right. And so are they going to be inclined to build that environment here? No. Right. They're the same people who are sending billions of dollars overseas to the foreign companies. Right. And then they're protecting their ability to steal and this copyright data, build these models, sell it back to us, take the money offshore. Right? And we need to change that to people who are like, no, we're going to protect the ecosystem here, let it thrive. And we're going to punish people who are trying to sell their technology on stolen goods. Right. We already have these laws in place. You can't rip off an Australian designer and import the goods and sell them cheaper, right? Like, we already have these protections. So I think what we're going to find is the ecosystem hopefully changes, the economy changes to be like, we're going to build Australian AI foundational products and companies here. Kids are going to have jobs now to go into. And we're going to create just a brand new industry that complements what we have today. Rather than saying we only can have one thing because that's all we've ever known. Like that's a pretty limited viewpoint.
I think the main challenge, you see everywhere in the news that everyone talks about AI not bringing the return on investment that everyone was hoping to get. But fundamentally, if you think about for AI to actually thrive, think about what you're doing with Maincode and the model factory, right? It's a completely different type of like infrastructure. Different type of like architecture that you need to implement to actually see the value of implementing AI, in a business. So now if you think about all these big enterprises that have been, running for like the past decades
years.
or 100 years, they have to now all of a sudden, adopt and implement AI solutions. So for their customers who are not necessarily like the same ones that they used to have 50 years ago. So now you have those new customers that are coming in. But if you just rely on just getting that, saying, we don't need those out of uni, people to come and work for us. AI is just going to do the work. You just, it's literally like you just making life extremely hard for yourself, right? So now, with that mindset that we need to change, and knowing that also there's a bit of work that needs to be done in terms of the architecture of these models we need to implement. Now all of a sudden you're opening the door to more opportunities, more, like you mentioned, like all these kids now all of a sudden become so valuable because they are now like the ones that are building the foundation of what's going to be the next step for this business.
And that's absolutely spot on, because as we create that need, so do the customers start to have to like build that capability inside too. So those are net new jobs, right? And they're working in concert with people who currently do those jobs in a way that's way more satisfying. So again, this idea that companies are going to like start firing people and AI is no, not at all. It's no different than when we had power drills, right? Like the power drill didn't just like magically drill them holes. You still need an operator. AI is no different. AI can't just suddenly become a human. That's just, again, it's rhetoric. It's doomer rhetoric used to control people. It's not real. And I think that, again, if anything Maincode can do from an Australian perspective is start to challenge some of that rhetoric and call some of that BS out. It's good, right? Because I feel like there's been a little bit of cargo cult syndrome, right, where everyone just agrees with the big people because largely either they don't have a differing thought or they're just like, oh, one day I want to work there anyway. And so it's just
exactly.
And
so it's still around jobs. How are you convincing Australia's brightest AI minds to stay home and work on the problems that they might be smaller in terms of scale compared to the global companies, and the impact is more national or Australian focused?
So what's really great is that people who really want to work in this space, some of the smartest people you've met, they very quickly put together that if you go over and work for one of the big US companies, you're not going to be doing anything interesting, right? But that's not just AI, right? So, I was very fortunate to be a core member of a, elite team at Microsoft, but once I moved on to the rest of Microsoft, you find out, right, that there's 10, 30, 100 engineers protecting the core of what's interesting and everyone else is just working around it. So when these folks go, I want to contribute to AI, I want to put my fingerprints on something new, you have to work for a model factory where you can actually do that. And so they immediately go, where can I go work at companies like Cohere, for example, right? Small, at the tip of the spear, doing really interesting stuff. Maincode is the only option in Australia where you can actually work on a foundation model built from scratch in a model factory. Everyone else is just wrapping APIs or they're fine-tuning models on people's stuff that they've borrowed from a organization that bought 256 GPUs and just renting them out to anyone who they can reclaim their money, right? So if you want to work in a legitimate model factory and work on actual foundation models with scientists and engineers and researchers, there's only one company in Australia to do that. So I think we are actually we're very fortunate. We have incredible flow of the most amazing people apply at Maincode. And of course we have a very stringent selection process. It's a very high bar. So hence we hire very slow, we grow slow. But at the same time, in the early days, of course, we're trying to convince people to just believe in us, right? But now with Matilda, with MC1,
the other way around.
Right. People are now like, oh, these people are legit. Like they're building stuff and doing real work. So I want to go work
hands-on.
And also, again, it's like, do you want to go join a 3,000, 5,000 person company? What do you think you're going to be doing?
Yeah.
You're going to be the smallest cog.
You're definitely like employee number or whatever.
Yeah, right. like what ticket are you closing, right, in this AI game? Like, do some model alignment, change this piece of text. Like, if you want to work at the core of the engine, you have to work in a place that is small enough for you to do that.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, definitely. And then in terms of learning from past mistakes, so we've had
I've never made any mistakes.
If Australia-made AI becomes readily adopted by Australian institutions, including government, what fundamental lessons from past failures, maybe welfare system failures, that were responsible for automation, what fundamental lessons can we learn from that, and what are the safeguards or guardrails that we're putting in place, or maybe that Maincode is putting in place to avoid those mistakes?
Yeah, that's such a great question. I'm going to do my best to try and like answer from my perspective. I think that we have to revisit how decisions get made in this country and by who. I think by kind of like ignoring the emperor's new clothes, right, of like, think of like who's making what these decisions, right? Like, how many models have they built? How much about AI do they really understand? So I say this again, right? Like, would you want someone about to operate on you be an elected official who campaigned their way to be Dr. Dave, and now I just take a crack at whatever I think?
Yeah.
Like, my only specialization is I'm an expert in opinion, right? You know what I mean? And hopefully trying to get the popular opinion, right? So I'm going to be like, what does everyone want me to operate now like, right? And so I think we have to be really conscious of the fact that we are in a moment when this huge technology evolution is happening. It's floating by, right? Like, Maincode is doing everything we can to make sure it doesn't pass Australia, but you've got a lot of people who are just like, don't know what to do, right? So they're trying to politic and policy their way through this, but that's not going to work. So I think the lessons learned have to be that we don't want to miss this opportunity, because the people who can cast the biggest force of resources and influence are too afraid and don't know enough to what to do. So I think as a country, we have to understand that while certain people, in these positions, and I don't use the word government because it's not just government, right? It's the people in power and leadership. Well, we have to offset that somehow. Would we have to break ground and invest aggressively and get it done and learn from that experience? But, I always use this example of, imagine there was just like, we need to start mandating teleportation, right? Because I'm worried that Dave's going to teleport into Renee's shower, right? So like, let's make sure we're clearly, well, guys, we haven't actually built any teleportation. No, let's make sure we can. Right, let's make sure our diamonds right with 4 pillars, do all the communities, right? And it's like, okay, like, guess what? Guess what you're not going to do? Yeah. Build teleportation. Yeah. Right? So, yeah.
And so on, touching on regulation as well.
I like that.
The teleportation, it's a great example. I love it.
I was like, oh, Dave, what are you doing here?
Yeah. Anyway. And you know what? We'll be able to policy that better once we do it, right? You'll be like, what did we learn from that, right? Like, but if we're just imagining all the possibilities of this thing that doesn't even exist right now, like, great work, right? Like,
yeah. So
still on regulation and that topic, when it comes to the stance on children and AI. So we've already seen that there is a view on children and social media, and Australia is taking probably first steps in comparison to the rest of the world. What is your take on regulating AI for children?
Look, and again, I don't think AI specifically is the thing we need to regulate. I think we need to be more conscious of the impact and prevalence of any technology on kids today. But I also think we need to have a very balanced, informed approach to how we talk to kids about AI, because as soon as you start to make it scary and you blow the worst case scenarios, and make them all that kids are looking at, you're also depriving a generation who's way smarter. And I think this is the thing that, again, when policymakers are out of touch with the generation that's coming up, they don't understand how this lands with them. So is there, and then the other thing as well is they're looking for solutions that allow them to just take their hands completely off, right? So it's like, I want a no touch, zero touch approach to just, hey, look after my kids for me. It's like, no, like parent your kids, support your kids. That's how you do it, right?
Educate them.
Right. And do it in a way that actually
empowers them and makes them feel safe. That's how you actually do it. But if you're looking for the government to policy and mandate your child's safety so you don't have to do anything, well, that applies to everything, not just AI.
Yeah.
But I think when it comes to AI, parents need to work with their children, teachers, anyone in the support network need to work with them closely to help them understand all the possible pros and cons, and then be actively and intentionally engaged in that deal.
But I think like the challenge is because it's so new with AI that even the parents and everyone is at the moment extremely confused on, the capability. I mean, the thing is you're starting to hear stories of people saying sometimes, like in for instance, yesterday at South by Southwest, there was one of the speakers who mentioning how they use AI to be able to, turn a story of an event that happened to their kid at school into a Pokemon type of story for them for their bedtime. So it was very interesting how they use AI to be able to do that. But for that to happen, that person, man on Dave, that's another Dave. Six like other Daves are like
into AI
onto the next level. So he basically obviously is someone who is very much in touch and understands
tech savvy.
But does that actually mean that everyone had to be tech savvy to fully understand? And I think that's
and how to
maybe that's that's probably a question that I should be asking you.
So it's like technology literacy, right? Like we talk about financial literacy. It's almost like now there needs to be a baseline of technology literacy.
And I think that again, why it's important to have lots of people contributing in this space, why we hope that Maincode is only one of many Australian companies who come up and build factories and foundries and create foundation models, is that you now have diversity. But when AI is only told from the point of view of 2 or 3 massive incumbents who are backed by massive technology companies with very clear agendas, you don't have diverse thought, and you don't have the ability for people to go, I choose the thing that makes sense to me. So I think when we talk about literacy and education, it has to be in a diverse form that can land with all the different people who need to hear it. But I specifically think as well, like helping kids understand exactly what the AI is, right? And what is it capable of doing helps them also bridge, their own experiences. And again, if you explain that these things are able to take something and generate something new. And while that could be a story, but that could also be a picture of you that you didn't, give permission to, right? Or you didn't consent to. These are the things that now exist in the world. So be conscious and aware of them. That to me is the right approach, right? It's an informed view of what's going on, rather than going, it's all one way or it's all the other.
Which is not the reality.
It's not the reality. And I think, again, we've seen these, to what you said before about lessons learned, we've seen this with social media, right? Like if you demonize it, right? Or if you don't expose them in a really safe and healthy way, they're not going to learn and grow.
It's like prohibition in the 1920s.
Or like don't let your kids go out because it's really scared, or just let your kids do whatever they want.
Like no.
Both of those just aren't the right approach, right?
So Dave, any final words for our audience, our listeners, what they can look out for? I mean, this is a big week.
Look, I think we covered so much, right, in our chat, right? And I think for me, what I really hope that everyone gets out of South by Southwest this week is that we've demonstrated, hopefully, that we can really play in this space, and that I hope it provides inspiration and encouragement for a group of people thinking today, like maybe we could go build something, and like you can, right? And maybe it may not be something that you can get all the resources together. Come talk to us, right? Like we want to stimulate and grow this ecosystem and community. We don't want to be just
an ecosystem,
right? And so I hope that someone is going to watch the podcast, or they're going to see something at South by Southwest and go, maybe I want to be foolish, right? And we have these principles, right? Being foolish, take point, ship it, right? Like, we want people to do crazy things, right? Because that's what changes the world. And to feel like, okay, someone else Australian did this, maybe we could too, right?
Yeah.
And so that's what I really hope
Seeing
people
is
take away.
believing.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think also just to add on to what just a cherry on top of the cake, So there's this very beautiful quote that was mentioned by one of the speaker again yesterday at South by Southwest, one of the event that we attended. Someone said people should go into their future rather than shrink in their past.
Yeah.
That's
Which is
super
exactly
powerful.
what you're saying, right?
Yeah.
So embracing this next, journey in our human journey, because it's everyone's journey, right? Where, AI is coming in to change and disrupt. And I think rather than just like shrinking and just reminiscing like the good old days when you used to just jump on a cow or a horse and then just, go and have fun. Now you need to embrace the future.
Yeah.
So and it's good to see that there are now organizations like Maincode, all these
in Australia
that are basically kind of like changing that, the status quo of what we think an AI company should be and what AI should look like from an Australian perspective.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Maybe I should become a politician.
Shouldn't crack open a
Yes. Let's do it.
So I think fully sponsored.
Paperwork for later. Cheers. Thanks, Dave. And that's a wrap, everyone. Thank you for joining us for the episode. Remember to like and subscribe, and we'll see you in the next one. Cheers.
Cheers.